Well, hello there. It's me again. It's time for another look at Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. This one is 1M6 2M1 to Jabba's throne. Oddly, this music is not actually in the finished film, but I've scored it anyway because I wanted to see what was missing. And in fact, somebody very kindly in the JW fan forum, for those of you who know, you know, this person has kind of redone it. I don't know how accurate it is, so obviously other people might sort of chip in with that. But this is it. It sends a link to a Google Drive with this on it. So this is the sort of the sequence without any of the dialogue. So this is the previous cue to see how it sort of fits in. So that's the atonal thing. So that's the cue that we have at that particular bit. Yeah, it's a really interesting cue. I mean, it's really short. It's only 10 bars long, but seems sort of crazy almost to sort of do an entire video just for it. But let's go through who's playing. So we've got 3 flutes, 2 oboes and a cor. So it's an extra double reed for this film. We've got 2 clarinets, bass clarinet, 2 bassoons, contra coming in a bit later. We've got 6 horns. I don't think trumpets and trombones play in this. The tuba plays, just one of them for this one. Glockenspiel, we've got harp, we've got this guillotine drum and a large gong right at the end. And also the lovely ARP 2600 synth as well, which plays. And then just standard strings. I need to look up how many were playing in each for this particular thing. It could be slightly different from A New Hope. But you'll notice that it's just violins at the beginning. There are no violas at this point. And I'll do the orchestration in the second half of this. But let's just have a look at the actual music itself, because it's really, really interesting. It sounds octatonic. It kind of is, but with provisos. As with all of these things, it's kind of, well, it's a bit ambiguous, and it's meant to be, I think, sort of disorientating. They've just entered this sort of rather strange place which they're unfamiliar with. These are the droids, it's kind of scary as well. The main feature really is this extraordinary woodwind chord, which we get here. So I've done it in terms of voice 1, voice 2. With each individual instrument, but I've also done a sort of, polytonal thing. But that's very much octatonic, sort of Petrushka type sort of effect at this point. Which I think is octatonic 1. So in other words, T1. Transposed up 1 semitone. If you follow Mark Richards' course, that's confusingly called octatonic 2. But I just mean that it's been transposed up 1 semitone from a middle C to a C sharp. Because of that, I think. I think so, but I'm sort of thinking of it. We've got... it could actually be octatonic 0. Because it's got both the C and the C sharp. So I think it is Octatonic T0 actually. So my bad. But anyway, that's what's producing that sort of rather extraordinary chord. And I don't know why, but I sort of suddenly sort of thought of this sort of little fanfare from the 20th Century Fox. Not sure why. I think it's just the dotted rhythm, really, more than anything else. So the fact it's sort of, block chordal. But anyway, jumping ahead slightly. So we start off with this type of E flat minor with a major 7th chord. So that's the E flat minor bit, and then that's the major 7th. So for this, not really very easy to follow with that keyboard, to be honest. I'm just going to get rid of it, I think. But that's how we start. And interestingly, the whole thing ends almost with the same chord, 419. It just doesn't sound like it at that point. So it's interesting how often, even with something as linear as film, where you've just got different modules, and it's almost each bar is a different module. That's a module. This is the second one, and then the third one is this phrase here with the bass, and then the fourth one is that sort of phrase at the end. Because, of course, it's following what's going on screen and is quite particular about what's going on. And it's also interesting that although there's dialogue, it's not as still as you might think. There's always something going on. So even if there's stillness here, there's movement there, stillness here, but movement here. So just in terms of the general compositional design, it's quite interesting. And as with a lot of John Williams, these sorts of atonal, quasi-atonal, in this case, sort of octatonic, these sorts of things, there's a lot of sort of gestural rhythms which take place. So first of all, we got a little trill, and on the, just as this happens, we've got this bum digga ba, which is a very particular sort of free-floating particle, as Frank Lehman would say. It's not sort of a leitmotif, but it's a recognizable thing, a motif. And it's very chromatic, although actually with this particular bar, interesting enough, I sort of, extrapolated them all, and it's like a 732, which is just a harmonic, either a harmonic minor or a harmonic major. So I sort of added the notes up. Yeah, and it's almost, except with that passing note there, but all of the other notes all of these are all part of the E harmonic minor. Isn't it amazing that you can get from like that? So I just wonder whether that's a really extraordinary bit, isn't it? So going from E flat minor major 7 to an E harmonic minor. And it just sounds really chromatic and atonal, but there's a basis of tonality there, which is why I called it post-tonal. It's sort of a catch-all, really. Some people might think it's a bit of a cop-out, but I think it's actually quite a good way of describing this sort of music, where it's not atonal, it's not chromatic necessarily, quite, but then it's not tonal either. So in terms of sort of pure sort of harmonic, minor or whatever. Or major. So there's that bar, and then it goes off into this sort of octatonic territory, which is interesting because even though I've started not on C, I'm actually using the E flat and the E natural, because each one of those each one of those is present in the first two bars. So it's as if he's sort of designed it that way so that, okay, he's going to have some sort of octatonic-y type thing going on. And there's just little clever ways of actually getting there. Bar 1, setting up the E flat. Bar 2, let's say, setting up the E, so that you can get a sort of octatonic thing going on into that. and then it continues being octatonic until we get really just to the very last bit, where in the bass we've got sort of so the sort of cello carries on with a fifth of the chord, so we've got this sort of you know, I guess G flat thing, except the fact that we've still got that going on, so it's sort of supporting that, and then it goes into almost like a sort of dominant preparation going into B, because here that's definitely B minor. And it's a sort of Phrygian mode. Like that. Phrygian mode on B. Which is, again, quite extraordinary. So he's set up a sort of E flat, let's call it D sharp, E flat, E, goes into that sort of octatonic area, then becomes sort of B. And it's as if he's gone from E flat as a sort of stability, adding a third on the bottom of it, and then adding a third on the bottom of that right at the end, so it goes into a G sharp territory. So it actually makes a sort of G sharp minor triad, but he keeps adding thirds below whatever the sort of main tonal center is, which I think is a really interesting thing. Again, it's a sort of tertial shift. It's quite a common thing in film music. But it's just something that, you know, even a score as short as this, or a cue as short of this as this, has so much else in it as well. So then we've got a little bit of melody after this sort of brief interlude, which is all horns playing. So the melody and the horns, and it's counterpointed against this sort of bass line as well. I'm not going to include the collegna because that's just basically a rhythm at that point. So let's just listen to it on the piano. It's very dark. It's a ridiculously loud thing for a sforzando. Block chordal harmony with basically a B minor pedal all the way through. Like that, with sort of harmonics which are sort of very, very high. And again, it's a similar technique where you've got very, very high, very, very low. It's a sort of Berlioz type sort of thing. And then the middle section is taken up by the tune with a melody. And that sort of gives it a real clarity of orchestration, which brings me on to the orchestration. And it's quite helpful sometimes to sort of juxtapose between the two, to kind of look to see what's going on at any one time. So let's just put that up like that, just so you can have a complete view, and then you can screenshot that if you want to. Let me just move that out of the way. Let's get rid of it. And then on what, you know, if you've got two screens, you're going to have sort of both things on at the same time. So the first little thing we're going to look at is just this. This is just the strings, but then let's have a look at that bar 2 and how that gesture takes place. So let's have a look. Yeah, so we've got a sort of solo melody in the tuba, not doubled anywhere else, and then we've got this sort of interesting sort of, you know, part of that sort of E harmonic minor bit in the tuba. We've also got the harp, which is sort of doing something, but it's playing different notes to the tuba, and also the strings, which are complete, you know, which started off with just violins, still abound as well, and they unison on the E flat, but then go into major thirds basically at that point. So it's a nice sort of linking device between things, and it's very, very high. So we've got very low, we've got mid, and we've got high in this particular bit. Then we've got lots of mid, which is this, which is wonderful. It's a sort of almost like a Columbo drama sort of TV sort of thing going on there. So we got mid there, high, and then low here at that point. So it's interesting how each of those sort of three areas, treble, middle, bass, is sort of contained in this particular cue. And it's continued on. So again, we've got the bass here, we've got very, very high, that's also bass, and the middle of this particular bit. So in terms of doublings and things, we've got in the wind flute 1, flute 2, flute 3, and in the clarinets, clarinet 1, clarinet 2, bass clarinet, or clarinet 3 if you want to call it that. So it's contained in the same thing. We've also got the bassoon, which is also part of that. And that correlates to what we had here in voice 1. And then in the oboes, we've got that. So the oboes are playing the lower, basically, bit of the chord. So it's sort of interlocked all the way through. And you get this really nice homogeneous sound. Notice also at mezzo piano, all of those notes are sort of going to come through. The clarinet's going to be tempered slightly with the flutes to allow the balance for the oboes as well, which is generally louder, probably. Although, of course, the players would temper that, and the conductor would as well, which would be Williams himself, a very fine conductor. So then we move on into the next bit, which is this large melody section. So the melody roll is played by the horns. Now you might sort of think they actually go quite low. So how does he mitigate against that with not getting in the way of the actual bass itself? Well, if we think about it, these bassoons here are very, very low indeed. I'm not going to even bother with that because that's just percussion. It's just a lot of people playing percussion. But the bass line, the true bass line, is really this, which is low. Yeah, and it has that sort of march to the scaffold type sort of idea. So it doesn't really interfere because A, it's in a different timbre, it's in a different group of instruments, and it's also the bass. So they are playing that note, but actually there's nothing which is playing that B at that level, which would be on that line. So it's not overlapping at all. It's a very clever little bit of orchestration, which Herb's done at this point. Not quite sure. I haven't seen the sketch, so I don't know quite how much he did, but there we go. And at that point, the bass takes over again, and we have a dyadic thing going on. Like that, sort of in double octaves. Except an octave lower. Which I'm trying to do. Oh, got the wrong button. Like that. And that's supported by the ARP as well. And it just sort of hisses out at that point. So, yeah, it's a really interesting exercise in high, middle and low, and also differentiation as well. So there's very little doubling, in a sense. I mean, the only real doubling is the wind at this point. And everything else, I don't think there's anything really playing in unison at all. There's lots of different things going on. I suppose, actually... I'm sure that should be an F sharp. I think I've just made a mistake at that point, because everything else is in sort of unison. So there are occasional unison doublings. In this case, we've got pizzicato with the tremolo strings. Is there anything else doubling that? The answer is no at that point. And we get this nice effect. So you get that little bit of articulation at the beginning of the notes to sort of differentiate that sort of tremolando effect. And just a word about harmonics. Obviously, there would be not natural harmonics. They're going to be artificial harmonics. So that is just that, just standard stuff, really. So I think it's probably that. I will double check it with the source material that I've got, but I think that's right. And the best source material is actually the actual music itself, audio-wise. So let's just see whether I can do it from here. There's no D sharp in there, so that I'm quite confident that that is the case. Let's just double check on this one. Keep missing it. Yeah, in fact, I can hear a tuba there as well, I think. I wonder whether that have just been missed out. It's actually quite hard to tell because of the sort of glassy quality of those tremolos. That's the tuba as well. No, I think it's just the way it's played, actually. So it has this sort of slightly glassy effect. And also it's very right ear orientated as well, just because of the stereo field at that point. But it's interesting how the ear can deceive. And I need to use the force a bit more with my oral dictation, I think. So anyway, but that's basically that whole cue. I've rambled on enough, and I'll bring you the next one forthwith as soon as I can. Thanks for listening.